with new problems and issues facing Muslims every day. Things which were unheard of during the time of the Prophet ﷺ are now commonplace. So, how does a religion which had its advent a long time ago keep current? Well, to kickstart our discussion, let's take a look at this clip on the matter.
Does Islam need modernising? This is a question that's been floating around for quite some time. While some may say no, many others believe that Islam is not only a religion that is stagnant, but is in fact backwards when facing the realities of modern-day world. So we're here in one of the busiest streets in London asking people what they think.
I used to be a Christian before, and one of the things that has constantly happened throughout the history of Christianity is that it's been constantly modernised and updated and changed. And the beauty of Islam is that it comes down from the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and Allah's protected the Quran, He's protected the Hadith, and you can't change these things. And in that, it's a book for all times and for all places. So no, Islam doesn't need modernisation because Islam is modern, and it is modern in every single time.
Islam is already moderate itself for all time, because the holy book we believe in, we believe everything is there for the entire lifetime of this earth.
Perhaps not many of us know about our own history and heritage. How many of us know that supposedly in the backward system of Islam, that one of the oldest universities in the world was founded in Morocco by a woman named Fatima al-Fihri in the 9th century? I'll leave that thought with you, and now back to the studio.
Well, interesting clip there. Do you think that Islam needs to adapt to deal with new problems? You can join in our discussion and call in live to the show. The number will be appearing on your screen throughout this segment. It was very interesting to hear people's thoughts there. Sister Shahina, what did you make of that clip?
I think, like some of the brothers were saying, Islam is here for all times, and as the video reflects, I think the question that's raised is, why does it need to be changed? Because if you are claiming Islam was fine all those years ago, it was correct, it was relevant then, what has changed so much now that it's not relevant anymore? Because if 1 + 1 = 2 back then, 1 + 1 should still equal 2 right now, isn't it? And inshallah, this is what we will discuss further. I won't say too much, I don't want to give it all away now.
Absolutely, it's definitely an interesting discussion. Sister Zara, let's come to you. I mean, Islam has often been accused and criticised of being an outdated religion. Why is this?
Well, I think it's a funny question to begin with, given that most of the people that actually raise this criticism advocate either democracy or secularism or liberalism. And democracy, for example, is over 1,000 years older than Islam. So in that sense, Islam is actually technically younger and more modern than those ideas. And it's not just something that Islam is criticised of. In fact, most religions have or are at some point criticised of being outdated and outmoded. With Islam in particular, I think there is a pressure to go through the same procedure that Christianity went through. So Christianity went through a sort of what they call a reformation. And in effect, this was to neutralise sectarian conflicts amongst different Christian groups. So they tried to establish the lowest common denominator amongst Christians in order to try to get some peace. And what effectively happened was that religion became separated from governance, from ruling. And this is what people would like to see for very different reasons, both Muslims and unfortunately, non-Muslims too. They would like to see the same thing happen with Islam. And there's a reason for that. And it's also to sort of undermine the confidence of Muslims in being able to talk about Islam as well. One of the fundamental values which is advocated under this ideology, which we can now understand to be, some people may have heard the term of liberalism, which basically organises all of these concepts of democracy and secularism. And one of the main values that is advocated is individualism, the right of the individual. And this clashes with Islam because Islam, as we mentioned earlier, does not necessarily advocate the rights of the individual. It advocates the obligations of the individual and the rights of the community, and in some cases the obligations of the community together. So we have examples in the Quran and Hadith about how Muslims will be accounted for as groups as well. So we learn from the stories of the people of Ad and Thamud that entire nations were destroyed, but not all of the people were corrupt in that nation, but they refrained from commanding the good and forbidding the evil. So even in that way, you can become accountable for somebody else's wrongdoing. So Islam takes a different approach to individual rights and individual obligations. And in this case, that is why Islam tends to be at odds with the current prevailing system, and why Muslims are told we need to reform Islam to conform to these strange ideas which aren't actually compatible. But
well, we have been seeing a lot of media coverage about things like, for example, women-led prayers or gay-friendly mosques. I mean, surely these are examples of Muslims who have decided that actually reformation is needed. These are all examples of that.
Absolutely. I think this debate is completely bizarre. It's so strange that we've gone through over 1,400 years of Islam, and suddenly we just realise, oh, we were wrong about these issues all along. It was never being questioned, but now it is. It is very strange. So we need to ask ourselves, why is there that current need to redefine Islam? So maybe there's two possible reasons for that. First of all, there's this pressure, isn't it, to make Islam more acceptable. But then we have to ask ourselves, okay, if I'm now changing this, our deen, in order to fit in with a modern world, that means that I'm saying, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who made me, who created me, who knows me better than anyone, I know better than him now. That we're the ones who are in a better position to decide. So, astaghfirullah. And then secondly, if someone wants to say, okay, the sources have been misunderstood, okay, fine. Then we need to have a discussion about how do you then approach these sources, the Quran and Sunnah. Do you approach it by having an answer you already want and then see how you can distort the deen in order to fit that? Or do we approach the Quran and Sunnah in the correct way, i.e. this is a guidance sent by Allah, so our job is to look into it in order to find out, okay, here's a current situation, how does Islam show me how to live that issue? And always to remember, Salah warns us about letting our desires completely ruin, the understanding of Islam and how our lives. In Surah Al-Baqarah 216, perhaps you may hate a thing and it is good for you, and perhaps you may love a thing and it is bad for you. Allah knows while you know not. So, subhanAllah, we have to accept that he does know better than us.
I think that's at the heart of the issue. But we often hear, Sister Shahina, don't we, people saying, how can a book which was, revealed so many hundreds of years ago still be relevant? And how do scholars extract from that book and from the teachings of the Prophet ﷺ new rulings about things which didn't exist before?
I think trying to make this as easy as possible. First of all, this process is called ijtihad. Ijtihad is linguistically Arabic word which comes from the root word jahada, which means struggle. However, in the Sharia context, it's quite different. In the easiest way that I can put it, it's the process by which you take a ruling, Sharia ruling, find an answer to a new reality or situation by going back to the text, which is the Quran, Sunnah, Ijma' al-Sahaba, which means the consensus or the agreement of the Sahabas, and then you have Qiyas, which is analogy, comparing a like situation with another like situation. And this process, so just looking into this process in itself contradicts the whole claim that Islam is not applicable today. Because the whole purpose of ijtihad is that when a new situation arises or a new problem arises, then you go follow this process. And this is a process, is something that Jews, they exert a lot of effort into doing. And the other important factor with ijtihad is not any person off the street can do it, or any Tom, Dick and Harry. You can't just go and open the Quran and decide to get the English translation and say, okay, I don't see anywhere here where it says women can't lead prayers. I don't see anywhere here where it allows this or allows that, or that says homosexuality is allowed, or all the new things that people are coming up with today. So this is a complete contradiction to say that, because you have to have the Arabic language. Number one, the Quran was revealed in Arabic, so you got to have a very good knowledge of the Arabic language. You have to fulfill certain other strict criteria to be able to do that. You have to have knowledge of the hadiths, the evidences. You have to have the knowledge of the Quran. Any layman can't just pick up a Quran now and say English, okay, hijab is on. It doesn't mention that hijab is fard. That is a really important point to understand, inshallah. And the other thing was
it's very much a realm for the scholars then in that case. It's something that the scholars are kind of, as you mentioned, they do spend a lot of time and effort into doing this. Sister Zara, what's your take on this?
Well, I think we have to first understand what are these new issues that people are talking about. So people often say, oh, we have new problems now that people didn't face before. But in reality, this isn't actually true. The human condition itself does not change. Since the time that Islam was revealed, we have the same problems now that we had then. We have the same relationships with society. We have the need for family. We have hunger. We have fighting. We have peacemaking. These are all the very same problems that people had back then. The only thing that changes is the environment and the surroundings. You mentioned earlier technology changes. You mentioned earlier that medicine changes. And this is something that Muslims should look to reform and to update themselves in as they used to before, because this is even a realm which Islam advocates and encourages that we do develop in. But in terms of the actual problems that we face, at the heart of them, there are very few real new problems. A lot of the time, Muslims find it difficult to accept the answers. They find it difficult to accept the reality, which sometimes Islam provides answers where we have to really struggle to accept that. And people often feel, well, there must be another way in this modern society. Why do I have to accept this? And so I think the first thing we have to realize is that Islam establishes a method. So, for example, Islam establishes a method of covering yourself. So it says you cover from, head to toe. Your face and hands can be shown for women. The style with which you do that, you can adapt that. These are the kinds of things which change. The styles change, but the methods are unchangeable. The methods are unchanging because the methods have been established by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And who understands the human nature better than the Creator? Is it the modern secular society that we live in? Well, clearly not. We can look around and see how that's turning out. And just to quickly clarify on the issue of females, imams and stuff, just because not necessarily that it's essential to this discussion, but just for clarification, women can lead prayers, women can lead women in prayers. But the idea that women should now be in front of men is not something that's necessary. It's not something that really fits in with Islamic teaching or the sense. For example, women generally pray behind men to preserve their modesty. If women pray in front of men or lead a man in prayer, it's sort of a violation
of that. So just even on that basis, there's a lot that we need to think about, and sometimes we need to approach the situation just with a kind of sense of reality and then just kind of approach it and common sense, absolutely. Well, we do actually have a caller on the line, so inshallah, let's go to our caller. Sister Shazia is calling from Birmingham. Assalamu alaikum, my sister. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Shazia, you're live on Islam Channel.
Wa alaikum salam, sisters.
Have you got a comment for us, inshallah, sister?
I just wanted to say about the whole thing. I think many people don't understand when we say that the Quran has the answer to everything. They will think that, well, how can the Quran have the answer to everything, anything that could possibly come up in the future? So when it was revealed, obviously, 1400 years ago, they didn't have the internet. They didn't have all these things like cell phones, things like this. Yeah. So how can it provide the answer? Well, the point is that the Quran, it doesn't have specific details of specific things. Otherwise, it would fill volumes and volumes and volumes in libraries if it was to account for the whole of the end of time. But the point is that the miracle of the Quran is that it has principles in it, and I think this is what you have to understand, is that the principles are in the Quran and are in the Sunnah, and those will suffice till the end of time for any new situation that comes up. So if anything new comes up, say we have the internet today, or we want to fatwa on something, the learned scholars, they can go back to the Quran and the Sunnah and they can deduce those principles and apply them to a new situation, any new situation till the end of time. And that's the miracle of the Quran, isn't it?
Well, Jazakallah khair for your comment. Sister Shazia made a really interesting point in that. I think just off the back of what we were talking about in one of our earlier questions, the fact that the Quran is timeless. There's as she said, there's principles in there which are relevant in modern society, and the scholars, they extract those principles and apply it to modern day situations. And it has the answer for everything.
Absolutely. And just to add to the sister's point, even things like people might be surprised by fertility treatment, ijtihad has been done on that. IVF didn't exist at the time of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but if you go back to the text, it completely covers it in the sense that ijtihad has been done and they found. So, for example, you can have IVF treatment as long as the egg and the sperm are from the natural parents and placed in the original mother.
So the whole kind of system has been,
whereas
it's been
surrogacy, where it's taken and placed in the womb of another mother, that is not allowed because this comes in the way of kinship and mixes like ties of kinship, and Quran covers that. So if you look into this, you'll find that. And so one other really important point about ijtihad, Sister Hassana, is to add that ijtihad can only be done on areas where Islam gives you room to do ijtihad. So for example, in areas, for example, we know we have to pray. There is no room for ijtihad on that because there is clear-cut text and evidence to say you have to pray. So in terms of Ramadan and fasting, it's clear-cut evidence you have to fast in Ramadan. But ijtihad comes into an area where, say for example, it's Ramadan and you need to do a blood test. can we do a blood test? Does that invalidate our fasting in Ramadan? Now,
So
this
it
is where you
applies
do
to kind of
ijtihad.
areas where perhaps there's a grey area.
Yeah, so
and there
people
needs to
shouldn't
be
get
rulings
confused in
there.
the area where there's clear-cut text, so for example.
Yeah, absolutely. Sister Zainab, I mean, some people might argue that with change comes benefit. You know, there's lots of things that could come about. We mentioned their medicine and technology. You know, they've brought about great change and benefit to society.
Yeah.
So isn't this the case with religion too?
Absolutely. Masha Sister was explaining already that first of all, we need to look at what we're changing, isn't it? So in terms of the principles of the Quran and Sunnah as it is, the rules to life, you know, why are we changing a good thing? You know, if we always needed to change things all the time, then let's change everything. And I was just thinking, subhanAllah, imagine someone was to say, you know how parents look after the children and tend to them until a certain age. Let's change that, you know, because change is good, right? Let's just let them fend for themselves, and you know, why not? It doesn't make any sense. We have to think about what we're trying to change in the first place, isn't it? And whether it needs to even be addressed. And then, like the sister was saying as well, that Islam also has this idea that issue of science and technology, where it falls into the area of mubah. All these things are already stipulated, and also mashallah, sister was also talking about this the thing of, do our basic needs really change? So this issue of food, clothing, and shelter. Do we ever move from that? Do we ever, will we ever stop wanting to have relationships with other people? Will we ever stop interacting with other people? No. So all these things need to be that are already addressed, and there's no need for that. But
I think the only thing is before
yeah.
we rode camels, now we ride cars.
Yeah,
Maybe. So they're saying
So it's kind of
technological.
transferable
We still want
principles,
children, we
yeah.
still need to eat, still need to work, still need to fend for ourselves. So
But there is something to be said for the